Chip, hello.
Hello, Joel. How are you, buddy?
I'm good. Welcome to the Schiller and Hamilton Podcast, man.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for coming by.
Yeah, excited.
I know you wear God knows how many hats, but today we're going to talk about one of those hats in particular, which is your role as the chairman of the Historic Rock Hill Foundation.
Or is the Historic Rock Hill Board.
Board, yes. Yep. So tell me a little bit about that role, what your role is, and what the organization is.
Okay, Historic Rock Hill has been around since the 1980s. It started out with a handful of citizens who lived on Old East Main Street, the Old Town area. And Rock Hill at the time was going through a renaissance where they would the corridor on Main Street was being zoned commercial, and a lot of those old classic beautiful houses that were built, 100-year-old houses were being transformed into businesses, and they were losing a lot of their historic significance. So the residents of the time got together. They saw themselves meeting at zoning meetings all the time, and next thing they know, they started getting together on Friday nights, neighborhood picnics, and started scheming about doing ways to preserve the history in Rock Hill. And then that's what they started doing. They got to the point in the 80s where they were actually helping families buy these old houses to facilitate the preservation projects, and started giving out awards for the best preservation award and whatnot. And then about in 2005, the historic White home, the White family house, was available. And the White home was arguably one of the most significant historic houses in Rock Hill. Mm-hmm. When the family it was the end of the rope for the family. Historic Rock Hill was able to get the resources together, purchase that house in 2005, spent the next 5 years refurbishing it, raising the money. 2010, after the financial crisis, by the way, it was interesting how all that happened. Historic Rock Hill had the house totally remodeled and made the decision at the time to keep the White home. So 2010 to now, Historic Rock Hill is still preserving history by keeping up the White home. And it's a beautiful house, a beautiful facility, but it's, all our resources now are focused on that. And we're looking forward to having ways to branch out again and get the collective story of Rock Hill told.
So tell me a little bit about what's significant about the White home.
The White home was the home of George and Ann White, young married couple in the early 1830s. They had 4 children, purchased the property where the White home is now on Elizabeth Lane and White Street. Purchased the property in 1837. Right when the railroad was coming into town, and this was before Rock Hill.
Fortuitous timing.
It was great timing. So they bought the property. Unfortunately, George White, helping to build the railroad at the time, he died in the early 1840s and left Anne as a widow with 4 young children, and she is more than him. She actually built the house to where it is today. So Anne went through the Civil War. After the Civil War, her children became predominant citizens in Rock Hill, and she donated and sold a lot of property in Rock Hill at the time. She helped form First Presbyterian Church downtown near the fountain. And so to this day, that house is there to honor the White family for what they've done in our community.
If you drive by today, the White home just looks fantastic. I mean, the grounds look amazing. The house looks great. How did it look when when the Historic Rock Hill first took over the property?
Well, I remember growing up with the White family. I mean, the Whites who lived in that house went to church with us at First Presbyterian, and so they had kids, and we go over there and hang out and play. But the house became really very run down. And it was really good timing for Historic Rock Hill to have the opportunity to bring it back to its this status that we want it to be, what we see today. So it is a phenomenal place now, but before it was a mess.
So when did you first start becoming involved with the foundation?
I was started with historic Rock Hill actually before the White Home, and rotated off, but got back involved again about 6 or 7 years ago.
Okay. Getting back to the White Home real quick. So what is it actually used for today?
Today we use the White Home as a event space.
Okay.
It's a gorgeous place to have a wedding venue. The gardens outside are phenomenal, as well as any other corporate events that we have in downtown Rock Hill. It's one of the very few green spaces, is 4 or 5 acres of green space that's in downtown Rock Hill today. Yeah,
and it's absolutely beautiful. Yeah. What times is the White Home ever available to the public for a tour, just to come see it and kind of learn more about the property?
Yeah, we are. During the summer hours are kind of scarce, so it's always good to go online and give us a phone call to check and make sure. But if you'd like to get organized tours or drop by, we're constantly facilitating that.
Does it cost anything to come in?
$5 a tour.
Okay.
Yep.
You're kind of a perfect person to be involved with this organization. Not only are you accustomed to also dealing with a historic home, you know a thing or two about the history of Rock Hill, mostly because you've been here and your family's been here a really long time. Yeah. For anyone who doesn't know, can you tell us a little bit about that story?
Well, I can go back to Ann White, Ann and George White. Ann's maiden name was Hutchison. Okay. And Ann's father was named David Hutchison, and he came over with his family in 1773 with David and 4 other older siblings. So John and Sarah Hutchison came over from Ireland. It was David and his widowed mother after the Revolutionary War now, and this was in late 1700s, that 16-year-old David and his widowed mother actually signed an Indian lease for some property, to lease some property from the Catawba Indian Nation, right at a place called off the Catawba River, the shallow point of the Catawba River, which was known at the time as the Nation Ford. We all heard of Nation Ford Road and Nation Ford High School. That was the region, the part of the Catawba River that was the narrowest, that was part of the Great Philadelphia Wagon Trail. So when you were going back and forth from Philadelphia to Charleston, Augusta, inland and not out in sea, you would use this trail called the Great Philadelphia Wagon Trail. And it came right through, across right at the Catawba Indian Nation. And David and his widowed mother settled right at the crossroads. And to this day, our family, 7 generations later, our family still owns some property that he actually leased from the Catawba Indians. One of his daughters was Ann Hutchison White, that I mentioned earlier. She was predominant because as a widow, she never came back home to be with her dad. She never remarried. She figured out how to maintain the property and the farm and leased it out for folks who were travelers that needed a place to stay, and she made a business out of it, got her children educated. She was a remarkable, well ahead of her time, a remarkable woman. So then her children actually are still around today. So going back, it was her father was one of the very first ones that actually settled in this area. Wow.
So not only is your family just a large part of the fabric that makes up the history of this area, it definitely seems to be something that you not only have a lot of knowledge about, but you're very passionate about. Why do you think it's important, maybe especially right now, to remember the history of Rock Hill in this area, and kind of what is the role of historic Rock Hill in preserving that history and legacy?
Yeah, well, Joel, that's probably my favorite question. I appreciate you asking that one. Those of us who are in town, and is with your service on the county council, we are all watching York County and Rock Hill transform right in front of our eyes. I mean, transform more than we could have, any of us who've been here all our lives could ever imagine. And when that happens, every community, every city, every town, they have their own unique story. And Rock Hill in York County has a unique story. And if we're not careful to make sure that story is preserved and the truth is told, so to speak, this transformation that we're watching, we could lose that story. Mm-hmm. So I feel like it's real important that we get to celebrate our history and all the great things that's happened.
What's your fear if that's lost? What's your fear? Like, what's the consequence if we lose that?
Well, the consequence in my mind is that if history can tend to repeat itself.
Yeah.
And we go back and look at time and our times and trials and tribulations, successes and failures, and all those things that's happened is kind of paved the path of where we are today. I think telling the story of a community in itself is interesting and can be very entertaining. But it's also important that if it's not told, then something can repeat itself. Something else can happen that we would think we should have learned or known better than that.
Yeah, and I think maybe there's a little bit of perception that the historic Rock Hill kind of is the White Home and vice versa. Yeah. What's the role of the organization beyond being a caretaker of that historical property?
And that's another important question. I'm glad you brought that out because we have, since 2010 or 2005, when we acquired the White Home, historic Rock Hill has become synonymous with the White Home.
Right. For better and worse, right? It's an iconic piece of property, just absolutely beautiful.
But it's taken away from stories that need to be told when we're spending all our resources to keep up an old house.
Yeah.
Now we would need to celebrate and keep up this old house, but there's so many other stories to be told. Stephen Turner is a good example. He's on our board. We're blessed to have him. He thought he was going to retire and go off into the sunset.
Little did he know.
Yeah. But we roped him and we got him involved. But he's very passionate about the African American community and what's going on, and stories that are told, and stories that I didn't know about the Freedom Riders and the Friendship Nine and the whole civil rights era that happened right here in Rock Hill was just as a powerful, impactful place than anywhere else in the country. Is right here in our town, and he's making sure that story's going to be told, and we got lots of exciting ideas on the docket with that.
There's just countless stories and cool little bits of trivia to learn when you start kind of digging into the history of this area. One of my favorites is the name Rock Hill and how we almost didn't have that name. I think you know what I'm referring to because I already see you chuckling. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because that's just a cool little story.
Well, I think people know the story of Rock Hill was because they built the railroad through town and they had to blast through a flint rock hill to do so. Well, I think what a lot of people don't know is the reality. The only village that was in the area at the time was the village called Ebenezerville. It's out where the hospital is, the hospital area of town. Ebenezer Presbyterian Church, or Ebenezer ARP Church is there, which, by the way, that's where David Hutchison is buried, in that church graveyard. Well, that was the only community. When the train came through, it was originally slotted to come right through that town or village. And the folks in Ebenezerville went up in arms about it and said, we don't want that smelly train that would disrupt or scare our cattle or all kind of things they come up with, and not have this modern. You think about it. This is what, 1842 or something like that. This was trains were very modern, leading edge technology, and people were suspicious about it. So the town put up a fuss. So they moved the train track about 2.5 miles east of Ebenezerville, right through that Flint Rock Hill we just talked about. So if the town of Ebenezerville would have never been, short-sighted about what this technology would have done, perhaps today we would be known as the city of Ebenezerville.
Well, and I think it's really cool to know that there were families then, including, I think, the White family, and correct me if I'm wrong and tell me, who else was involved, but they had the foresight to see that technology as something to embrace, and they saw the future and the prosperity that it could bring. And rather than kind of be afraid of it or say, no, don't bring that here. They said, hey, if they don't want it, why don't y'all bring it over here?
Well, and literally Rock Hill was formed it was formed because the train came through there, right? Mm-hmm. So there was a gentleman, the family, Alexander Templeton Black. So there's two predominant founding families in town. The White family, we just mentioned George and Ann White, and Alexander Templeton Black. And he actually owned most of the property near that Flint Rock Hill where the train came through. So, he worked to actually map out the blocks of what the city was. And Ann White owned some property too, and she blocked off some streets, and they kind of, I think Squire Roddy, it was his name, the Roddy family's historic in our town. They mapped out what the actual main street was, what at the time Church Street, which is now we know as Black Street, and White Street. Those streets now today are part of our heart of downtown, but that's where the city started back with the two families to get that going.
It's amazing to me to think of something like Rock Hill just kind of coming out of the ground like that and kind of happening almost suddenly.
Yeah.
And then you look at where we are now, and you mentioned the fact that, your family obviously has been here for a long time. You grew up here. I moved to Rock Hill about 20 years ago. And just in that 20 years, I've seen just an incredible amount of change. I mean, the city's basically doubled in size.
Absolutely.
Just in the last 20 years. And I think when I arrived, it was probably, the end of what would be considered like old Rock Hill and kind of the beginning of the transformation. But what always struck me about Rock Hill has always been the sense of community and how people who are here kind of like hold on to that and cherish it like it's something tangible, like something you always have to like service and give back to and preserve and make sure that that community is well taken care of. And to me, that's really what makes this area really special. And I think part of that is the history, and the awareness of that history makes people want to do that.
Exactly.
And so, one of my fears is if that awareness is lost, is that sense of community is then at stake.
Yeah.
Do you kind of, I guess I'm looking for confirmation of that. Do you kind of get that same feeling? Is it that pride of place and history that kind of lends itself to the dedication to the community of the area?
Yes. And I think you answered the question you asked me earlier better than I did, I guess, is that's what could be lost if we don't keep that sense of community. Mm-hmm. Because there's so many folks moving in town. I know the neighborhood you live in at Riverwalk. It's a beautiful neighborhood. It's so cool to finally see something happening on the Catawba River. When I grew up, the Catawba River was where the Celanese plant was. It was all industrial and nobody went there. But now it's a phenomenal, gorgeous place and very happening part of Rock Hill. But it's more in my mind the expansion of what Rock Hill is in the sense of community.
Mm-hmm. What do you see as not just what do you see as for the future, short-term and long-term, for historic Rock Hill? Like short-term projects, long-term mission and goals?
Yeah, good question. I think our short-term mission is to create awareness and engagement in our community, to celebrate our collective history by preserving it, by telling it, making sure it's amplified and heard. And one of the important challenges that we have is that we want to let everybody know that we're more than just the White Home. The White Home's important, but we're so much more. I mentioned Stephen Turner and making sure we celebrate and tell the story during the Civil Rights era with the Freedom Riders and the Friendship Nine. But also we have some projects going on with your neck of the woods out where you are, the Red River Road side of town. Like I said, when I was coming up, it wasn't a place to go hang out. But ideally, that's one of the most historic places in all of York County.
Tell me about that.
Okay, so Louise Pettis, she is a retired history professor at Winthrop University. The Louise Pettis Archives is named after her. She stated, written that that area of town, there's a place called the Crossroads. I might have mentioned that right at the Nation Ford. There's a crossroads there. That is second to Kings Mountain as the most historic place in York County. Now, we know all about the Battle of Kings Mountain, how it was a turning point in the Revolutionary War, but there was a lot more history that happened right here on the Catawba River at the Nation Ford. That was mentioned earlier, the Great Philadelphia Wagon Trail. There was so much commerce going through right there because of the bottleneck of the river that so many treaties have signed. The Catawba Indian Treaty of Nation Ford of 1840, that was the treaty that was signed right there at the crossroads where near your neighborhood. That was where the Catawba Indian Nation sold the property, and the leaseholders became landowners at that time. And that's how the Catawba Indians to this day, there's some controversy that's happened over through the years, but they have their reservation today. And they're now a federally recognized Catawba Indian Nation. But the crossroads was where the true birth of commerce in York County was right at that spot, before the railroads, before the Indian trading past the French settlers to the Scotch-Irish migration, the whole works is right there. Yeah, and then, that's the ancient history. Then fast forward in time, I remember as a kid, the whole Red River Road was not an industrialized area. You don't hang out. But I remember somebody kept talking about Carhartt, the old Carhartt factory.
Like the Carhartt.
Well, at the time, I just thought it was Carhartt. How on earth could it be the Carhartt? You know, this is Rock Hill, the Carhartt. They wear all the work clothes and all the stuff, famous name out of Detroit. And I just dismissed it as an ignorant kid. Then as I grew up, I realized, yes, it is the Carhartt. Hamilton Carhartt himself built 2 plants right here in Rock Hill. The first plant that he had, from Detroit. He came in the early 20th century, 1905-ish. He actually bought what's today the cotton factory. The cotton factory was a mill that had gone into bankruptcy. It was actually, the interesting story, the cotton factory was the very first mill in York County, steam-powered, high-tech at the time. By 20 years later, after it went online in 1880, it was called the Old Mill, and it already, gotten to the point where it was in receivership, and there's already a dozen other mills in Rock Hill. That's how quickly the textile boom exploded in town. Well, Hamilton Carhartt recognized Rock Hill as the place he wanted to be to build his duck fabric on his overalls that he made for his workers on the railroad and to make automobiles. And he built the plant, or he bought that plant, and then he built a plant on the Catawba River. When I was a kid, it was called Randolph Yarns. It was still running mill called Randolph Yarns, but he built a plant there. He actually built a mansion on the Catawba River, and that mansion is still there to this day. The ruins are, not the mansion itself, because sometime in the 1920s, at some point, he had some family tragedies. I remember reading a daughter died in a car accident or something horrible.
I think he died in a car accident.
And then he died later, yeah. But the Carhartt USA had an imprint and an impact in our community right in that same area. And that same area started out as the crossroads with the early commerce all the way to Hamilton Carhartt. Yes, as you said, the Carhartt was right here in York County.
That's amazing. And those ruins of that mansion are spectacularly impressive.
Yep.
Just the ruins are quite a scale. I can't imagine how impressive that home must have been in its heyday. And
there's nobody can find a picture of it.
That's so unfortunate.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
I mean, I've been in touch with Carhartt USA. They have an archivist up there. His name is Dave Moore, and he and I have been going back and forth to try to find something, and there's nothing. He can't find, and he's anxious for me to let him know if we find something.
Has he at least seen pictures of the ruins, or have you sent him pictures?
I've sent him, yep. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. He's gotten some pictures from others. So he knew it was there, and he validated a lot.
So what's on the agenda for this year? Like, are you well, let's back up a little bit. I think another perception, or at least a question that a lot of people might have, is where the funding for Rock Hill, for Historic Foundation, where it comes from. because it's the name Rock Hill is in it. I think a lot of people assume that it might just be
part of the city.
Part of the city.
Yeah.
Where does the funding come from?
And we must always let folks know we are not part of the city, and folks think we're funded by the city. We love the city because we're the curators of the story, the history of the city, but we're membership based, and so we have fundraisers. In fact, right before I came here, I just left the Lowenstein building for a meeting on August the 20. I think it's the 26th. I think that Thursday, the last Thursday of the month of August. We're planning to have a fundraiser in the Lowenstein building. We're really excited because this is one of our big fundraisers we have every year that's not going to actually be at the White Home. We're taking it somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And if anybody hadn't had a chance to be in the Lowenstein building, you should go check it out because Gary Williams and Skip Tuttle has done some phenomenal work in there. There's a couple of Anderson automobiles in there, original Rock Hill buggy. And then Jim Ferris, who's a retired Bleachery employee, has built a scale model of what Rock Hill used to look like in 1953.
It's incredible.
It is. He just added the third phase today. I saw it. Just added yesterday. Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to go check it out.
The power plant and the backside of Lowenstein is really exciting. But anyways, we're going to have our fundraiser, and so that's and this is going to be. It's going to call the Historic Rock Hill Wine Trail is what we traditionally called our wine trail. But we got Rick Bridges on our board, and we decided to class it up a little bit. It's going to be called the Historic Rock Hill Wine and Beer Trail.
Okay.
So it's even going to be even better for us. And being in that location inside in the month of August, everybody's going to want to be there.
And I think that's cool because Rock Hill has gotten on the map pretty quickly as far as breweries are concerned.
Yep. They have.
I've lost count of how many we have now, but from zero to several,
yes,
in what seems like an overnight period of time.
Yep.
So in other words, outside sources of funding, private funding, is very important,
imperative
to the health of the organization. Yep. And again, I feel like, and I know you share this, that the health of the organization is imperative to maintain that sense of community and to keep a healthy community here where we are. So how does one engage with or become involved with Historic Rock Hill?
Well, we're actually, our website is being revamped as we speak. But it's historicrockhill.com. Mm-hmm. So I would encourage anybody to go to Historic Rock Hill, to check out our event calendar. You'll see on there, for example, I mentioned the Lowenstein fundraiser we're excited about. But every October, the third October of every month, we're going to, because of COVID last year, we couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
So last year, literally, I think we lost close to $100,000 in potential revenue that is important for us.
Wow.
So we're looking forward to getting cranked up again. We couldn't do anything this spring, but that's why our wine trail traditionally is in April or May. We're going to do it in August, but it's going to be inside. And then in October, we're bringing back our oyster roast. We can't wait about that.
That's spectacular. Yeah. Tell us about the oyster roast.
The oyster roast is something we've done probably, this is going on 10 to 15 years. But every year it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Well, the last time we did it in 2019, we made the most money we've ever had the biggest crowd. We've actually ran out of oysters. So we're going to fix that problem, and we're going to make sure that we're all going to be excited to get back and enjoy it.
And I was at that event. It was a lot of fun.
Yes.
It's outdoors at the White Home.
In our gardens in the back. And October is always, you can have some superb weather in the evening in October.
Yeah, it was absolutely beautiful. Well, you mentioned the challenges from last year. I don't want to rehash too much because I know it's somewhat traumatic to go through. Yeah. But that means 2021 is a big year to recover from all that.
Yes.
Tell me about the plan. How did y'all come out of the COVID kind of close down, and kind of where are we now in terms of openness and events?
Yeah, well, we're wide open now. Mm-hmm. So, but we went through we had to pay attention to the guidelines from the governor of South Carolina, who paid attention to the CDC guidelines and all the regulations that we all shut down for a period of time, like everybody did, and especially spring of 2020. But then again, South Carolina, our Governor McMaster was a little more open-minded to open up again than like North Carolina was. So we did get to take advantage of opening up a little earlier. So we had some weddings and other events that came from North Carolina because they couldn't get anything in up there, so they came to see us.
Competitive advantage.
That's right. That's right. So we did okay, but we still had, we calculate not having our big fundraising events between $75,000 to $100,000 revenue loss.
Wow. But for someone that wants to host an event at the White Home now, or a wedding, or whatever the case may be, you can get on the schedule, you can have your event, and have as much fun as you can possibly stand, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You ride by the White Home on weekends, typically you're going to see, like a Saturday night, there's a wedding out there, people having a good time.
And let me tell you, it photographs well.
Yes.
When you look at some pictures from weddings that are out there, it's just an absolutely beautiful venue. Well, for anything, especially a wedding.
Yes.
What else do you want people to know about historic Rock Hill?
Volunteer opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
I know we would like folks to know somebody would like something to do to get involved. We have a huge garden that's always needing to be sticks picked up and weeds done and things planted. We got a garden committee that's very active. We actually partner with the Master Gardeners Club in Rock Hill, which is nice. Even handymen and carpenters, having an old house. Anybody has the hobby of like to fix windows and paint and glaze. I know for those of us that own an old house, it's scary, but there's folks out there that would love to have an opportunity to help us. We just need to get the word out that, yes, let us know. We would appreciate the help.
I'm kind of chuckling when you mentioned windows, because the other day we were talking and you showed me first you told me a squirrel had gotten into the White Home.
Yeah.
Then you showed me the picture. The way that the squirrel got in was he broke in through a window.
I think he head-butted it.
I had never seen that before.
Yeah.
A shattered window. The squirrel just ran right through it.
Yeah.
So
Another challenge
of owning a very old home.
But I don't know, a lot of folks may know Russ Fraze. Russ Fraze owns the historic Fennel House over on Confederate, and he's restoring that. He's been labor of love for him. What he's done has been phenomenal. But he's been an excellent resource for us because he knows we can call on him to do things like fix a window like that, and he will make sure it goes back like it should, and he's been a good friend to Historic Rock Hill.
That's wonderful. And, if not for those type of people, and if not for, the all the volunteers, all the people who donate time and money to the organization, all the people who understand the value of preserving the history of the area. If it weren't for them, the organization certainly wouldn't continue and won't continue. So, I know you are. I'm very grateful for all those people that have contributed.
Yes.
And hopefully if anyone, is interested in the history of Rock Hill or is interested in preserving the history of Rock Hill, that they realize that this is the best way to do that, and that they're interested in, giving some time or funds in order to help preserve that.
Yes.
So
we do have an annual fund every year, and you can go to our website and hit the donate button if you feel compelled. So I encourage anybody to do that as well. Yeah, and it goes to, like we said, it goes to a great cause to help preserve that. Well, Chip, thank you, man. I appreciate you spending some time with us today. And I hope that this is part of a continuing conversation, because there's so many, we could just tell stories about the history of Rock Hill all day and have a great time. Well, and I mentioned Russ Fraze and the Fennel House and the story of the Fennel family. That itself would be a great subject to sometime get him in here. Okay. Yeah, and we also talk about scandals. There's some history there. We're going to leave names out of that. Yeah, Bush Bailey and I are good more friends. Recent history. Yeah, that would be, but it's still history. Well, it's like, in my mind, it's still recent, but that was like 2 decades ago. I know to a lot of people that seems ancient. Well, thanks, man. Look forward to the next time, and we'll make this a thing. Yeah, thank you, Joel. Yep.